and welcome to this week's episode of Not DnD, brought to you by EM World. As always, I'm your host, Jessica, and this week with us we have Jeff, who's here to talk about their game 5x5. Thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, and before we started recording, you talked about how you are a listener of the show, so it's nice to have you on to talk about your game as well as coming along to listen. So before we dive into talking about 5x5, I would love to talk about you and your background with games, because you've been designing games for quite a long time now. So could you give us a little overview of you and your journey into game design?
Sure. It started with D&D in about 1980. I started playing, but I lived in the Midwest in a part of the United States affectionately known as the Bible Belt.
Right.
So it was kind of a miracle that I was even exposed to the game. My science teacher, who was out of Chicago, and it was his first teaching job, was going crazy in our little town and started a science club, which is really a D&D club.
Oh, okay, right. I didn't really think of D&D as scientific, but fair enough, yeah.
But no, so it was a D&D club, and when the school found out about it, they shut it down right away.
Okay.
But those of us who played had been bitten by the bug.
Yeah.
But the teacher had the books, the teacher had the dice. We lived in the Midwest. Our only resource for purchasing books and dice and things like that was the local Walmart. So, which meant we had nothing. So we started writing our own, creating our own immediately from the get-go. So right off, I was doing that out of necessity, as much as anything else. And it really changed my life a lot. I have cerebral palsy, and I was pretty much an outcast in school till I started playing D&D. Then I found my tribe or whatever, I found my group of kids.
Yeah.
And I stuck with it ever since. But I approached design at that time in a way of trying to solve the problem that I didn't have dice. I didn't have dice. I didn't have books. So I wanted to be able to make a D6 do everything it could do. Yeah. And that's kind of stuck with me throughout my journey. I'm always trying to get the six-sided dice to do something different, and play around with that. And that was where I started. But doing my own thing, I guess it started because one of my players at the table was cheating all the time.
What?
We were playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay.
Yeah.
And it was a D% system. And whichever die was... Now, they have those percentile dice now that have the 10 spot on one of them and the ones, has the extra digit. They didn't used to do that. You just rolled two 10-sided dice and you decided which was the ones and which one was the 10s. Well, for him, it was whichever one was the best for him at the moment. It kept changing. And I got to thinking, what if I designed a game where you rolled the percent, but you just always read the low one first? Then you couldn't flip it because it was always to your benefit. I don't know why it bothered me that he was cheating. It really, whatever you want to do, whatever you do that makes it fun, I don't care. These days, I don't care. Back then, I did. And so I actually designed a system for a D6%, which was really D6%, read the low D6, read the high D6. And that was the first game I designed. And put it up on the web. At that time, there was a thing called Yahoo WebRing. Okay. And there was a free RPG WebRing. And I became a part of the free RPG WebRing, offered my game up there. There was a thing called UncleBear.com. It was one of the earliest places that hosted free RPGs. And I was part of that community. And ultimately, Yahoo WebRings kind of collapsed, and those free RPGs found another home. And I discovered through that a place called 1KM, 1KT, which is 1,000 Monkeys, 1,000 Typewriters, which was another hosting site. But something in addition to free RPGs that they hosted was a thing called the 24-hour RPG contest, or challenge. And what it was design a game in 24 hours and complete. And that fascinated me. And as I started doing that, I actually did the challenge several times, designed a couple of games, and then a couple of those games became more games. And from there, I just kept designing. I just kept doing it and putting it out for free on the internet. So there's all kinds of games out there for free that are out on the internet that I did. That started as a 24-hour thing and then developed into something bigger after I started that way. But it does speak to my design philosophy, which is keep it short, keep it simple. So all my games are pretty simple, pretty short, pretty easy to get into, very accessible, which again speaks to my beginnings where, I didn't have access to books and dice. So I'm always conscious of how easy it is for the average person just to pick up and play, and how many resources do they have to have in order to get started. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I think that leads us really nicely into talking about 5x5, because that is, you can see all elements of your history of games in this game for sure. I think it's looking through it, it's a very accessible game in terms of you do just need the D6, like you mentioned, but also in terms of the rules. Because when I was reading through the core mechanics are really simple to pick up. Like I'll get you to explain it in a moment, and everyone will kind of know how to play. But there's a huge amount of versatility and different rules that you can add in. So if you want more crunch and you want more to it, that's also kind of available there as well. So that was really interesting about it when we're looking at rules light games this month. So tell you what, Jeff, why don't you give us an introduction into 5x5, what the game is in your own words?
Okay. 5x5 is a rules light, multi-genre resolution mechanic that can be used as a role-playing game. It's very simple. I started out with this idea of, people, they look at their character sheet and they try and figure out what they want to do. And they have, a million options on the character sheet. And I got to thinking, why does my strength of 10 exist on my character sheet? Why does my wisdom of 10 exist on my character sheet? Because those are average, normal things. If it's 10, it's normal. And I got to thinking, what if all the normal stuff, all the expected stuff didn't exist? You just threw it out, and the only thing you put on the character sheet was the stuff that was different. And so when I was designing 5x5, I played around with the D6 and decided to make the 6 a 0. And what that did was you multiply the dice when you roll them. You roll them and you multiply them. Well, if you multiply anything by 0, it's 0. So that becomes the most common roll. And I thought, okay, that's everything that's not on the character sheet. Everything that's not on the character sheet is zeros. And then you can just add the stuff that's interesting about your character. Just add the interesting parts. Just add the stuff that's necessary and useful. And your character sheet suddenly becomes from 2 sheets of stuff to a couple of sentences. That was the goal. The way the game works is you have a couple of things that define your character. Maybe you're making a character for the Great British Bake Off, and you're good at baking cupcakes, and you put cupcakes as one of your skills, and you have a cupcakes of 4. And so then when you roll the dice, you need to roll a 4 or less, and that's how it works. And you roll the 2 6-sided dice and you multiply them. And I wanted to keep the numbers simple. I found that I actually made the numbers simpler by removing doubles from the equation. Doubles are also an automatic success. So between rolling 0 and rolling doubles, you get successes. And that creates a nice baseline of about 50%. And then from there, you go up. And that's the system. It's a roll under system. It's inspired a lot. We mentioned Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. It's inspired a lot by Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay because it's a roll under system. You're trying to hit a number and roll under, and then there is some combat mechanics in there that are right out of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay because they were kind of an afterthought. I had my mechanic. I had my. You're going to make your character by coming up with a couple of things and assigning a couple of numbers, and you can play anything. I mentioned playing Great British Bake Off or whatever. We haven't done that, but I've done zombie apocalypse games with it and superhero games with it and anything you can think of. The combat mechanics are very simple. You roll on whichever trait you think would be appropriate for fighting. If you have one, you'll roll under that. If you don't, you're trying to roll 0 or less to hit or hurt your opponent. And damage is just a d6, add a bonus for a weapon, or reduce that damage for armor. Again, that's straight out of Warhammer, because I use the exploding d6, which is if you roll the highest value, you get to roll again. Because people love that. People love,
exploding dice are fun. Yeah.
Getting the exciting moments. So that's all in there. And it's very straightforward. It's very clean. I don't have an initiative system. I just say, let the players go first and then go around the table. Yeah. Like a board game. Just go around the table. Keep things going. Don't spend a lot of time trying to decide how everything works. Just
It's interesting you say the Warhammer Fantasy is the inspiration, and now you've mentioned it, I can see it, but I didn't initially think so, because I find Warhammer Fantasy to be less approachable, to play. Like, you look at the rule book and it can feel a bit confusing, whereas 5x5 felt quite straightforward and simple. Was part of your intention to kind of strip back that a bit and make it so it's more,
But when I played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, I was playing the first edition. I don't know what it looks like now. But it's kind of like comparing first edition Dungeons and Dragons with what we have now.
Maybe that's what I'm doing, because I'm playing a second edition campaign. So maybe that's where I'm.
There's a lot of there, but really it's just I have a number. I want to roll that number or less. Now they did have more because they had hit locations and stuff like that. I didn't keep any of that. It was just the idea of a roll under system. I thought. For me, I know it's existed elsewhere, but for me, that was the first place I had encountered that. And I really liked the idea of, I have a number here, and that's my target, and I don't have to figure out what I need to roll. I know it. It's right there. I just have to roll under that number. It's so easy. It's easy to understand. It's easy to explain. And so that's where I went with it. So you have a couple of things on your sheet that you're good at. You have the numbers, you know what you need to roll. Anything else, you just have to roll a 0, and you don't have to write them down. You don't have to write down that you have an average strength. We know you have an average strength. We know you have, average this, average that. That's not the interesting part. So that's kind of where it came from. It's super fast. You can make a character in seconds. Because it's really just pick a couple of things that you want to do and assign some numbers. The hardest part is deciding what you want to do, making that decision. But it really will do anything. I did a multi-genre thing where I said, I want everybody to come to the table with their favorite character from fiction. And I'm going to throw them all together in the same place. And we're going to do this story where they meet and why they meet and what's happening. And I had this idea about this great universe disrupting thing that was causing all these universes to crash into each other. And I had a player come with Snake Plissken from Escape from New York, and somebody who came with Bob Newhart from the Bob Newhart Show.
Sure.
And we played, these characters met, and it had Bob Newhart would demoralize the enemy by psychoanalyzing them. It was funny. It was fun. And they all worked together because the game doesn't try too hard to emulate reality. It tries to just give you a baseline for some fun. That's the goal.
I mean, looking through the game, it felt to me like it would be a good game if you were trying to introduce some people to role-playing. So players that perhaps had tried role-playing before, this would feel quite accessible to them. Would you agree with that? Or?
Oh yeah. I've played this with people that have never played anything. In fact, that's kind of where it started. I had a group that had wanted to play something and never played anything before. And I needed something easy to get them started. And this was kind of born from that. like I said, I wanted to throw out all the stuff in the character sheet that wasn't necessary. So I just sat down with them and said, okay, if you wanted to play somebody in this kind of setting, what would be interesting to you? What would they be able to do that you would care about? You know, what's the important stuff to you? And they would go, well, I would want to be able to do this. Okay, well, then write that down on your piece of paper and give that a 5. You know, and that's kind of where we started. We just, there was nothing. And so it's so easy and it's so accessible and it's got more structure. And I have since added, you've got, I know we're in a podcast, but if you're watching on a video, you've got the picture of High Five up there, which is a superhero version of the same thing. Because it has evolved and I've done little versions of it that add a little more detail to fit a specific idea or structure to create a particular kind of gameplay, but just a little bit, you know, let's add this to make this happen, you know, just a little bit more.
So what does High Five bring differently, for example, than to the 5x5 system?
Well, it adds some, whereas 5x5 says create whatever the heck you want. High Five says, let's create an attack ability. So think about how would your superhero attack a bad guy? And then let's create a defense ability. It narrows things down a little bit so that you're doing the things that you read about in comic books a lot. And a lot in comic books is about fighting the bad guys. So, you know, there's that. And then I added, let's add what you do for a living or what your career is or what your secret identity is. So that, you know, because everybody has a secret identity, or at least in the comic books, that's part of what's interesting to me. And then add somebody who's important to you. Actually added a NPC person as a trait on your character sheet. So if you're doing something and they're involved, you can utilize that ability, because Lois Lane's always getting in the way, you know, or helping or whatever. Those characters are there because they're important. And in superhero comics, they're part of what grounds the superhero and makes them part of the world. And that's important to me when we're playing. I don't want to just be, you know, rolling to hit, rolling for damage. I want the players to feel like they're part of a world. And so that's an aspect of High Five, and it's an aspect of another one I did called Little Colony, which is a science fiction one. But in that one, instead of creating your stats based on what you want to be good at, you create your stats based on who you're associating with. There's this little world of people, and it's an insular world, if I'm using that word correctly. It's isolated because you crash and you're in this little colony by yourself with these people. So if you're good at doing this thing, you're good at it because you learned it from somebody else who's in the colony, and you associate with them, you spend time with them. So I start with, who do you spend time with? And then, okay, what did they teach you? So that right away, you're anchored in a community and you're part of the world. So, and that was important to me. That's something I find very interesting. I want to learn how to create games that kind of break out of the mold. I'm so interested in doing something that's non-traditional, and yet I'm from a very traditional background, so it's hard for me. I read a game called Golden Sky Stories. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'm not familiar with that one, no.
It's a Japanese game, but it's all about playing these animals who are magical animals that can take human form. It's an interesting distinction, because we'll play D&D and you'll play your ranger, and your ranger can become a wolf or something, right? He can take animal form. No, this is a bunny rabbit who turns into a person, but still acts like a bunny rabbit. But this game was all about role playing. It's all about these animals adopt this little village and try and help the people in the village because they care about it, because it's their adopted home. And so you're playing these animals who are trying to help humans, and it's all role playing. There's nothing but trying to make connections with the humans and trying to role play what's happening there. And it doesn't use dice. It's a diceless system. So interesting, so interesting. And I read it and I was fascinated about it. And then I'm like, I'll never get my people to play this with me. It's so different.
Mm-hmm.
But so I would like to make things that are different, that still kind of have a bridge,
Mm-hmm.
that people who are more traditional can go, oh, I see how you get from here to here. And that's kind of what I tried to do with Little Colony.
Mm-hmm.
I created it based on stuff that I already know how to do, and then took a little bit of a different approach to hopefully make something new. We'll see, maybe.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I mean, the original 5x5, I think, was first released in 2008.
Yeah, it's
And
been around
so,
for a while.
yeah, so I mean, if people are interested, it is available on itch to go purchase and download and take a look at. Links up on the screen or in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast. But I guess these different iterations are your way of, over the years, kind of tinkering and playing with it more, because any system that's been out a long time, every designer I know looks at it and just wants to just change this and change that. So I guess your way is by all these different things. Yeah,
it is. Yes, it has gone through many iterations. Actually, there were just 5x5 itself had 3 iterations. And the reason we're talking about it now kind of is I simply recently re-released this version. I was playing what would be, I guess, the 3rd version of the game, and it was failing. It wasn't doing very well. Okay. And I went back and I talked to people, and they were like, "Yeah, I play the original version. I don't play the new one." And I realized that I changed too much. Okay. It was better when it was simple. And so I went back and I re-released the first version. I had lost the documents from 2008. I retyped the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
But I kept it all the same. But then I went ahead and released it to Creative Commons. All my stuff is Creative Commons. Everybody can have it for free. Everybody can change it, play it, copy it, whatever. It's yours. I make it so that people will play it, and it's creative. So, but that one wasn't. Originally, it was a copyrighted game because, I don't know, Creative Commons wasn't a thing in 2008.
Sure, yeah.
So I really released it under Creative Commons, reproduced it as a zine. I think the original format was 8.5 by 11, but now it's the smaller zine size. I'll hold this up, but nobody's going to be able to see it on the podcast. But I have little printout booklets of them that you can get. You can do print on demand if you want to, and that does cost a little money because it costs money to print it.
Sure.
And if you do go to my itch.io page, you can voluntarily throw a little money my way if you want to, but don't feel obligated. My gosh, just download it for free and play it. That's what I want. I want people to enjoy it and have fun. And they have. I've had feedback. I mean, it's been around since 2008, so I get the occasional email saying, "Hey, I love your game." I actually first released 5x5 to the Creative Commons because somebody contacted me and said, I want to use this for my classroom. Do you have a classroom edition that I could give to my students? And I didn't, but I said, you know what, I'll put the Creative Commons on here and send it to you. And I guess they made copies for all their students and let them take it home so they could play, because we're talking about it being accessible. This person wanted to play it with all the people in his classroom. So yeah, must be easy enough for that. So yay.
Fab. And I love that philosophy has come through from your very early gaming experiences when you're like, I want to play this, but I don't have access to it. And now you're like, I'm going to make sure everyone has access to this. So it's come full circle from that first early experiences back in the 80s. So that's fantastic. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for coming on to share 5x5 with us. And if anyone is interested, take a look. The links have been on the screen or in the show notes, so you can go and find it there and take a look. We didn't record this live, so if people have any other questions, where's the best place to kind of get in touch with you online?
Well, you can go to my Blue Sky page and just drop me a note there. There's chat there or whatever. So that's a good place. And if you go to if you follow the link to my itch.io page, I think there's a link there to my blog and to everything else. I'm linked up, so you
Great.
can just go find me there. And
Perfect.
I answer anything. Yeah.
Great. Well, that sounds great. Before you go, you have already mentioned another great TTRPG as we've been talking, but I always say for the end the question, do you have any other games you'd like to recommend? So do you have any others?
I do. I actually want to recommend a couple if that's okay.
Sure.
Both readily available,
Mhm.
but both I'm betting ones you hadn't heard of.
Okay, nice.
One is called There and Hack Again
Okay.
by Lakeside Publishing.
Mhm.
And it has hack in the name because it's based on something called the Black Hack by David Hack. And if
Okay.
you're familiar with the tradition in the OSR, they take and put hack on a thing when they take D&D rules and try and change them a little bit. And that's what was done here. But what There and Hack Again does is it's a pun on There and Back Again, so The Hobbit. But it's so it just everything is streamlined, it makes sense. And I talk about liking a sense of community, and it does some really nice stuff with this idea of you starting in a place where you belong and then going on this great quest and then coming back and making this place you belong a home, and that you have to go back there to level up. You have to go back there and you have a sense of belonging there. You have a family, you have, people that you leave behind, so that when you're out in the world fighting this great evil that threatens your home, you have a sense of loneliness. You have a sense of wanting to be back home. There's this mechanic called dread, which will make you feel sad or whatever, but you can fight it by talking about home with the other players, or looking at a memento or something favorite, or smoking a pipe. There's these things that are very connected to the whole Tolkien kind of Lord of the Rings idea or the Hobbit idea, but it approaches it from a storytelling standpoint. And I think it's so clever. And then it's combined with these very streamlined, clean rule set. It's brilliant. There and Hack Again, wonderful.
Okay.
The other one I want to mention is a superhero game, and I love superheroes. I'm just crazy for them.
Sure.
And this one is so unique as well. It's called Biff Bam Kapow. And
great name.
And it's by Spectrum Games. And it's a superhero game, but it's specifically designed to emulate the 1960s Batman TV series. Batman TV series and the Green Arrow TVs, not Green Arrow, not Green Lantern, Green Hornet, Batman and Green Hornet TV series of the 60s, which was very formulaic, very specific in its way. It created this world where the superheroes would go in and they would fight a bunch of henchmen, and they would get beat up and they would get put in some death trap, and then they would have to escape the death trap and go fight. And the thing I like about it is, it's very tongue in cheek, which keeps everything light and zippy, which I like. But then it emulates the combat with cards. It has these cards that you can print out and use, that instead of concentrating on, I do this much damage, and you don't have hit points, you don't track any of that stuff. Every combat goes exactly 5 rounds, and at the end of 5 rounds, you have to have built up so much momentum. And if you've built up enough momentum, you win the combat, and suddenly all the henchmen fall over or they run away, because that's how all those combats always ended. They lasted until the very last second, and then at the very last second, the combat was just suddenly over. Because it had to stay exciting for the TV viewers until it wasn't. And so that's how it did it. It emulated that idea. But there's 2 different sets of cards. One set of cards is set up for the first combat, which the heroes are really supposed to lose. You're supposed to be beat up and put in your death trap so you can escape it and then come back and win the day. And although that seems so very tropey from the time, it was the way comic books worked. You always had this fight where there was a big cliffhanger at the end of the issue, and then the next issue, the hero came back and won the day. So these cards are designed to kind of emulate that, but it's not tied to it. It's these cards are going to give you less momentum and is going to make it harder for you to win. And chances are you're probably not. And then the second set, these cards are going to give you more momentum, to make it more obvious that you're going to win, because that's what you're supposed to do. But it's not predictable. The dice can still mess you over. You still have to kind of pivot. But what I like is the cards also contain some text that give you some narrative ideas that suddenly make you describe. You're not saying, I hit the bad guy. You're saying, okay, I'm going to pull this net on this bad guy and capture him, because the card narrative says, trap the bad guy in some way and you'll get bonus momentum for doing this. So suddenly you're thinking outside the box and you're trying to get the most out of each and every scene and each and every moment. And that's great. That's great. You're doing things that are different than I rolled to hit, I rolled for damage, I rolled to hit, I rolled for damage. Great little game, biff bam kapow. Lots of fun. If you like your comic book superhero games to be fun, then this is the way to go.
Fab. That's two great recommendations there, and I hadn't heard of either of them, Jeff. So you are absolutely right. Thanks for telling me all about them. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on again and giving up your time to be here. Really great to hear about 5x5, and excited to hear about more games coming from you soon, maybe another time.
Fantastic.
Thank you for everyone who's watched and listened. We will be back next week with another Rules Light tabletop RPG to share with you. But for now, we'll say goodbye. So thank you very much, and bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.